Ghosts from Stories. This is a very interesting story. Please listen carefully. There once was a prince in Cambodia. He was very fond of listening to stories very much. Since his early childhood, from when he had first learned to speak, he would make only one demand, that he wanted to listen to stories. An aged servant from the palace knew many stories from various countries. He was very good at telling them too. The king gave him the job of telling the prince stories. The prince would listen to a story each night before he went to sleep. In this way, the prince grew up. Even when he reached the age for getting married, his constant craze of listening to stories did not abate. The prince was of a jealous nature. He would not tell anyone else the stories that he heard. Even if his friends wanted to listen to them, he would avoid telling them. Now, in reality, the stories were all magic stories. They all had a life of their own. After a story had been told, however, it would die and become a ghost. Then the ghost would enter into a leather bag that hung beside the prince. The ghosts were not able to come out of the bag. The stories would only regain their life if the prince told them to anyone else. The prince knew nothing of all this, so year after year, the ghosts from the stories remained captive inside the bag. At first, they did not find this too bad. They would spend their time sitting in the still smell of the leather bag. They told each other about their happy times and their sorrows. Gradually, however, the crowd of ghosts grew larger. Pushing and shoving began inside that small bag. There was even no room to move one's arms and legs, let alone to lie down. All this made the ghosts enraged, so they would always make plans as to how they might get their revenge on the prince. It was he, after all, who was responsible there for their miserable plight. One day, the prince's wedding was arranged with a lovely princess from the neighboring kingdom. The main roads of the kingdom were decorated beautifully. Gates were constructed in places. It was decided that the marriage ceremony would take place in a temple at one end of the kingdom. Hearing this, the ghosts discussed and decided that they would take their revenge on the day of the wedding. This date seemed the most appropriate to avenge their plight on the prince. The palace was full of life from the morning of the wedding day. People, servants, relatives were all bustling about. It was the prince's wedding after all. Meanwhile, the ghosts of the stories were making all kinds of evil plans while remaining inside the bag. One ghost said, "The prince will surely get tired from traveling to that distant temple in order to get married. He will also feel very thirsty. Therefore, I will turn myself into a beautifully decorated golden pitcher and lie beside the road. Seeing this, the prince will command his men to fill the pitcher with water and bring it to him. The moment the prince lifts the pot to his mouth to drink the water, I will turn into a sharp, shining sword and attack him." "That is a very clever plan," said an extremely thin ghost. I too have an idea after hearing this. There is a large vineyard on the way to the temple. All of you must have noticed I will turn into a ripe, juicy bunch of grapes and hang from a tree right in beside the road. After seeing such lovely grapes, the prince will surely want to taste them. When the prince lifts the bunch of the grapes to his mouth, I will turn into a poisonous scorpion and will sting into his neck. Hey, that's a great idea, friend, said a smart looking old ghost. He patted him on the back and said, now listening to my plan. You all know that marriage ceremonies have a formality. The prince will have to step on a sack of rice while climbing the stairs to the temple. When I will do is turn myself into a few sharp pieces of glasses and hide inside the sack. Then the prince's feet will cut and bleed when he steps on it. Isn't that a good idea? He waved his long white beard in appreciation of his own talent. Finally, a pitch black ghost, a bag of bones, pushed his head up from the bottom of the sack and said, all of your ideas are nice. I too have a good idea. I will turn myself into a poisonous snake and will hide in the prince's bed. As soon as the princess and his wife fall asleep, I will bite. Where will the poor dear run to them? Even if all your plans don't work, he wouldn't escape me. The ghosts became very excited while discussing how and when they would start their work. They could not realize that their whisperings turned into loud shouting. They didn't even notice that the prince's old servant had heard all about their evil plans. After hearing all of them, he decided that he must save the prince at any cost. Surely enough the prince became very thirsty on his way to the temple. Seeing a golden pot at the side of the road, the prince commanded his men to fill it with water and bring it to him. Immediately, however, the old servant came forward and said, no, prince, you must not drink any water now. Water will drip down on your lovely garment and spoil it. If apart from this, there is no time to stand and wait now. The royal guests were very surprised at the servant's audacity. The prince, however, immediately said, all right, I will do as you say. The truth was that the prince had grown up in the old servant's care since his childhood. He therefore always listened to what he said. After traveling a little farther, they passed by a vineyard. From a vine right next to the road, there hung a bunch of tempting grapes. Seeing these, the prince said, hey, what lovely grapes! Will someone go and pluck the bunch and bring it to me? No, not now, the old servant said. Your clothes will get spoiled by juicy from the grapes. Also, we don't have any more time. To everyone's surprise, the prince said, yes, you are right. I can eat grapes later on. A little while later, the wedding procession arrived at the temple and stopped. A sack of rice was placed on the first step. The prince would need to step on it to climb up to the temple. However, the moment the prince had raised his leg, the old servant ran across and pushed him hard. The prince's leg did not touch the sack. As a result, everyone became very furious to see this improper behavior. Surprised by the servant's uncommon daring, they made various comments to one another. However, must be done about this. The prince, however, immediately forgave the servant and said, no, please don't say anything to him today. He has raised me since my childhood. He has protected me from all kinds of danger. Please consider now he is grown old. How can it be justified to find faults with what he has does now? Nobody remembered the sack of rice amidst all of this commotion. The rest of the wedding ceremonies went well and passed without event. At night, after all the guests had left, the prince and his new wife were sent to sleep in a lovely room decorated with flowers. As soon as they were about to enter through the door of the room, suddenly the old servant pushed them aside. He entered the room himself. The servant had an open sword in his hand. He began striking the bed with the sword, this time a bit angry. The prince said, "What on earth have you started doing now? I have pardoned you a lot since this morning, but I don't understand what's got into you. What's the matter with you?" Without a word, the servant removed the bed cover with a single pull. A large black snake was seen to be lying there, cut into threads. The old servant then told the prince the whole story. Finally, he said, "Do you know why they were so angry with you? Because you didn't tell anyone else those stories. You kept them imprisoned. Stories are for telling people. This is how they remain alive. If you don't tell stories to anyone and keep them to yourself, this is what happens." Thank you so much.